Hello everybody, my name is Angel Rafael Toro, and today I'm going to be talking about Invincible Season 3. I say Invincible Season 3 is just as good as the other two Invincible seasons, which is a great sign going forward for Invincible fans. That means these creators and these artists are going to remain consistent with the product and remain consistent with the quality of it. If I'm not mistaken, these last two seasons only came out a year apart, so that is a very good sign. Also, the fact that they're just as good as the first season. Going forward, I have more confidence in them to finish this out with grace and to finish this out the way that they've started it. If you have not seen Invincible Season 3, I will be saying some slight spoilers. I'm not going to be talking about everything, obviously. I'm just going to be talking about the biggest takeaways for me personally, in my opinion on it. So yeah, the animation is overall better this season from last season. I like the way that they use perspective in the last episode specifically. They really get creative with flying fights when Conquest and Invincible are fighting. The perspective helps to see how fast they're moving and how hard they're hitting each other, and the camera kind of follows one of them as they're flying towards the other. It looks really unique to Invincible and really unique to flying action sequences in general. I think it's cool that in episode 7 we had that huge Angstrom Levy multiple Mark stuff happening over cities, and then the next episode the Conquest fight takes place in one of the broken cities that was a result of the last fight, so you get to see the same landscape, how it changed, and it just adds history to your world, and it helps with the world building. I think this season has a better case of Invincible Syndrome, which what Invincible Syndrome means is that the season starts off slow, and then it ramps up to a bigger and more satisfying conclusion at the end of the season. That's freaking nuts. The Invincible Syndrome is a little bit better this season, but it's still present, so I want to talk about that more later. But they did fix that. They weren't afraid to take their time to set it up, but they did do it quicker than the other two seasons. They've gotten better with their episodic episodes also. They have to do more with the overall storyline because it feeds into Mark's character more. For example, Titan's storyline was to show how different Mark handles certain situations now after all of his experiences. Powerplex's storyline was to verbalize Mark's inner turmoil. The characters have agency in the story, and these hanging plot threads that you may not think may relate as much. I think they did a better job on it this season than the last couple seasons, where they relate a little bit more because they're more related to Mark himself. I think that the best new thing to come out of this season is Conquest. Conquest is fucking awesome. His voice actor is amazing. I was listening to it, I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And then I found out it was Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Jeffrey Dean Morgan does a fantastic job as Conquest. He adds so much personality to the character, where he definitely could have just been one-dimensional. I mean, his name is Conquest. I feel like it's so easy to just do a normal military style dude who wants to conquer, you know? But he's more than just a brute. He's kind of off his rocker. He's a little crazy. His monologue on how much of a loner he is to Mark after all of the fights characterizes him as a crazy person beyond comprehension. He's someone who's so crazy that it becomes entertaining to watch him. He seems larger than life, having a different purpose that no one else has, a very unique purpose. And he doesn't care if a single person understands him. I also think it's hard as fuck that Conquest starts to open up to Mark about his feelings only because he was about to bury him alive. Throughout the fight, Conquest has these little character moments that make the fight more entertaining to the audience because it's not just fighting an empty husk of a Viltrumite character. I felt like last season, Anissa was exactly the type of person I would expect the Viltrumite to be, and Conquest subverted that through his character moments in the fight with Mark. There's that one scene where when he gets punched by Mark in space, he cuts the blood into the shape of a heart, and then he goes at Mark through it. That is so funny. I like how his design kind of juxtaposes his personality. He looks so stereotypically evil and so battle hardened. I mean, he doesn't have an eye. There's that one scene where it's cut off and it's just his dead eye, where it seems like he slips into his full Viltrum personality. It juxtaposes his outward personality of more, say he's playful. I don't know if that's appropriate, but he does egg Mark on to fight him because he's more playful and he's very prideful, obviously a Viltrumite trait, but he's silly. Unlike the other Viltrumites, he's very silly, which I really like. My biggest positive on this show is Mark Grayson. Mark, and specifically his character arc this season. At the beginning of the show, Mark was visually rattled by the events of the last 2 seasons, particularly with his decision to kill Angstrom. And killing is more than the act for Mark. It's a symbol that he's become a Viltrumite. His father spoke about the people of Earth as if killing was nothing to him. So to affirm to himself that he's not his father and that he's not a Viltrumite and he's more human, Mark takes the opposite stance of him, wanting to prove to not just the world but to himself that he is Earth's fighter and not Viltrum's fighter. However, after his experiences, Mark begins to question this moral base and his morality. At the beginning of season 3, he's still very stalwart in his beliefs. This is shown through his tutelage of Oliver and how much he harps on how bad it is to kill people. Although he's vocally against killing, Mark through his actions is starting to show that he's more accepting of his anger and is starting to show more violent tendencies. In the fight against the Reaniman, the Guardians of the Globe are baffled by Mark's brutality, even if most of them agreed that he was in the right and that Cecil was wrong. And when the future time travelers ask Mark for help, he outright denies them until the time travelers show how severe the problem is. Even with something as small as the Machine Head storyline, Mark showed how different he is now from his season 1 counterpart. In season 1, Mark helped Titan once he heard his plea to help regular people. Now, Mark sees himself as being wronged by Titan in the first season because of his lies and because of what happened, and doesn't trust Titan anymore, although Titan is right. Although his actions have started to seem darker, Mark is still a morally justified hero who cares about people and who feels extreme guilt over his past actions. This is where Powerplex is introduced, and Powerplex is here, as I said earlier, to vocalize Mark's internal struggles and his grief and his guilt, and spit them back at Mark to see Mark's reaction. Powerplex shows Mark that his actions have negative consequences on the people that he's trying to positively impact. This is because when Mark tries to go and help Powerplex, despite of what Eve told him that he's just crazy and seeking attention, and because Mark goes, Powerplex ends up killing his family. This all culminates in the last 2 episodes where his morality is tested the most. Most of the season, Mark has spent agonizing himself over killing Levy. But once Mark realizes Levy is alive, he regrets his feelings of murder and regrets his guilt and actually wishes he had killed him there after realizing that he's alive. Mark is not relieved that he is free from the guilt, rather he just wishes that he had done the thing that has tormented him the whole season. And once he gets the chance to rectify his wrongdoing in his eyes of not killing Angstrom, Oliver is there to encourage him. And he tries to kill him. But then Angstrom gets away and he doesn't get to. And after this whole interaction, Conquest arrives. And obviously, for those who watched the season 3 finale, Mark ends up killing Conquest, having a different solution to the problem than what he had with Angstrom. Having these 2 dire scenarios back to back gives Mark the answer to his questions. Once Mark sees all the destruction that Angstrom caused, he feels responsible for it. Once he killed Conquest, it was over. There was no more death, no more destruction. Mark finds the answer to his question and finds a solution to his problems. He decides that he's not going to hesitate to kill anyone who threatens his loved ones, making a full 180 from the beginning of the season and the beginning of the show. Although it's a complete shift, it's an earned shift and it's very natural. We get to see the whole progression of his feelings and how he arrives to certain conclusions and his ultimate decision in the end. We get to see him attempt to solve things the noble way, the old way that he used to think it was noble, and fail. And once he gives in to his anger, once he resorts to his anger to protect his family, he gets his desired outcome. I don't just have good things to say about this show, or about this season. Don't worry, I have some bad things to say. Although I stated that the slower pace at the beginning of the season did work, I think it still does take away from the overall enjoyment of the story. I can't lie and say that I enjoyed the beginning of the season just as much as I ended the end of the season. But I also can't lie and say that it was for nothing, because I enjoy the end of the season because of that setup. But I do have to take into account that beginning of the season, the enjoyment was hindered a little for the purpose of the end of the season. I also want them to do more with the side characters. And what I mean by that is that I want them to do more with the side characters that are important to Mark and less with Mark's less important side characters. Just to hone in on the story a little, I feel like this season tried to juggle so many things and tried to do so many different things. It's trying to juggle a Viltrumite war while also trying to follow Nolan and Alan, while also trying to deal with Angstrom, while also trying to set up the ground level stuff with Titan and Machine Head. They're doing a lot of things. So I feel like honing in on the characters that are more important to the central plot of the main character will help tighten up the story. Although Rex and Ray have a great and touching and loving story, the connection to our main character, or lack thereof, throws their place in the story into question. Although it's quality, it just kind of happens parallel to the main story, as opposed to supplementing the main story. Maybe I'm just not seeing the nuance of the connection between the two stories, or how Rex relates to the story as a whole, but to me, that part felt disconnected. But I'd say overall, I really enjoyed the season, and I am genuinely looking forward to more of what Invincible has to offer. The action is as great as always, if not a little bit better. The gore is as great as always. The writing is as great as always. I don't see how this season disappoints you if you're an Invincible fan. But thank you all for watching.